and foremost, before we go into how to liberate yourself energetically, we have to go down the statutes and the understandings of hexes, spells, and curses. Okay. Now, in order to cast a spell or place a curse upon somebody, okay, a curse is a negative intent, okay, and a spell is a conception energetically that you place upon an entity, okay, for whatever your intentional reasons is, okay. Mostly, and 9 out of 10, these are bad reasons, okay. And the hex is the mathematical angle or the shape or figure that you use to dictate the direction of this being's energy. Now, in order to place a spell or a curse on somebody, you have to have a language. You don't need a language for hexes, but you do need a language for spells and curses, because spells and curses create belief systems. And in order for somebody to subscribe to a certain energetic pattern, which completely replicates itself over a period of time, they have to have a language to which their conception is limited, their perception is limited in what it is they perceive. And so I'll give you an example. A sentence or term. I'm coming out with a whole lecture on occultic vernacular and enchantment expression. Expression enchantment. So it's going to be called occultic vernacular and expression enchantment. Be on the lookout for it. It's coming very soon. And so with that being said, family, this is just a small taste of what I'm going to be going into. But I'll give you an example, right? The word grammar, okay? Because you use proper grammar when you're speaking, and we use words, okay, to create sentences and terms. Now, words is the word swords, okay, with the S on the back. So you take the S off the back of the word sword and you put it in the front. Now, we know that swords are used to destroy and go to battle with. Same thing with words. Now, I did a video. I can't remember the name of it. It was language something. This video probably was over a year ago. But in this video, I touched on how the Adam's apple, okay, as well as your language, is meant to change frequencies. And I'll be going into this a little bit in this video now. So delving into it momentarily for this particular point I'm trying to prove. When you speak, right, your tongue is supposed to touch the ridges that's on your mouth. And these ridges create friction. We know that friction creates electromagnetic charge, and this electromagnetic charge is supposed to travel to the brain and stimulate the pineal gland. And we know once the pineal gland is stimulated electromagnetically, it opens up, and there's a valve in the brain called the neuromelanin tract. There's a tract in the brain called the neuromelanin nerve tract, which produces liquidized melanin. And this liquidized melanin is stored within the third ventricle of the brain. And once the third ventricle of the brain is released via the stimulation of the pineal gland, causing the pineal gland to open up and release the liquid out of the third ventricle, it spills into the fourth ventricle. And then this liquidized melanin then glazes the brain, and particularly glazes the dipple antennas, which are located in between the internal and external layers of the skull, which then stimulate and activate psychic kinetic ability, putting the brain in a delta state. So we understand that channeling is also done, and it has been proven to be done when a channeling being's mind is in a delta state. Now, language, particularly the English language, puts you in the alpha beta state of the brain. Now, going from worst to best states of the brain, there's beta, alpha, theta, delta. Delta is bliss, peaceful happiness. Theta is joy, kindness, being in a similar, you're not in complete bliss, but you're in a happy state as well. Alpha, the alpha state is being like in a worried state, a panicky state, a state of anxiety. And the beta state is pure fear and the lowest level of vibration. So the alphabet, okay, has vowels, A-E-I-O-U. And these vowels, as well as the language itself, stops your tongue from reaching the ridge of your mouth. And so you never stimulate your pineal gland upon vernacularly expressing yourself. And so what's happening is your ability to manifest your reality or speak things into existence to a certain degree has become energetically imprisoned. And this is due to spells and cursive. Because once again, when we go back to words, right, you use words, okay, in order to create sentences and terms. And sentences and terms confine you to a certain module of thinking, just like prison. When you go to prison, what does the judge do? He sentences you to a specific term of confinement. That's your time. And so the English language is having you is having you vibrate in the alpha beta state, aka the most negative contingencies of your brain, to where you constantly in a lower level of vibration. And this is actually an energetic form of imprisonment that you're being forced to create sentences and terms via grammar for the duration of your life. And the word grammar comes from the Latin word grimoire, okay, or grimoire, however you want to pronunciate it. I'm gonna say grimoire. It comes from the Latin word grimoire, which literally, a grimoire was a demonic book used to summon demons. Go look this shit up. And so grammar, what you use to vernacularly express yourself and communicate, the etymological roots of that word comes from the Latin word grimoire, which literally is a book that's used to manifest and summon demons. And so every day we speaking evil into existence using the English language. This is why the English language is the most difficult language to learn, because it's the most spiritually disdained language metaphysically, period. And so bringing that back to hexes, right? Boom. Now that we've proven our premise that you need a language in order to cast a spell and curse somebody, and because once again, the language is used to get them to subscribe to the belief. I'll give you an example, right? On energetic imprisonment. Before I go in, when you see Buddhist monks and Chinese people speak, right, and you watch Chinese movies and guru movies, they always say I or one. Now, the Western Hemisphere, likes to make fun of things like this and make you think everything's a joke, and they want to make a joke out of the way that Chinese people speak. But I'm gonna give you the science behind it. What Chinese people are doing when they speak like that, or people that you see like that in the movies talking like that, the I and the one, they never say me, basically. What they're doing is they're speaking in a fourth person perspective. So a three-dimensional, because remember, we're talking about hexes, okay? And we're going to be going into three-dimensional shapes, sacred geometry in a minute, and energetic direction caused by sonic geometry. But with that being said, coming back to this point, if you say, I'm going to give you an example of a spell and a curse, right? And limiting yourself. If you say I and me, okay? What you're doing is you're subscribing your consciousness to what you conceive or conceptualize to be I or me. So let me give an example. This is my favorite example to give. I've been giving this example for years. I'm going to do it again. If I was to tell you at home, raise your hand, right? And you raise your hand. And then I ask you, did you get a command to the body to raise your hand? Or did the body just throw your hand up? You're going to say that you gave the command to the body. So since you can command the body, that means you're not the body. You're the one in control of the body. So let me give you an example of a miniature curse that we all go through every day. If you look in the mirror and you say, I'm ugly. A moment ago, you just raised your hand. And you confirmed to yourself that you were not your body. So if you're not your body, you don't even know what you look like. Because you're the consciousness inhabiting this body, aka this vessel, for a certain amount of time to have an earthly experience. And so that being said, if you're not this body, how can you be ugly if you never seen you? So when people ask you why nobody never seen God, have you ever seen your own soul? Have you ever seen your own consciousness? No, you haven't. Only thing that you've seen is a representation of your energetic self, which is the source of everything that it's embodied in. So with that being said, we cursing ourselves every day to a three-dimensional perspective, because 3D, okay, is being able to perceive physical reality, aka the five senses. 4D is to be able to monitor yourself having that experience of perception. And so let me give you an example. 3D is to say, I'm drinking water out of this cup, okay? Or let me give you a better example. 3D is to say, damn, I spilled water on myself out of this cup. A fourth dimensional perspective is while you're drinking the water to say, make sure you don't spill water on this shirt. You following me? And so a lot of people can't obtain that fourth dimensional perspective because they're too busy limiting themselves to the belief that they're the third dimension. And so you have people running around every day, insecure about themselves, doing crazy things for money, and living their life as ghoulishly and devilishly as possible because they're living to please the fictitious aspect in which they believe themselves to exist, aka on a third dimensional plane. See, and what is a dimension? Just a point of perspective. For all my artists out there, you know that in order to advance the perspective of your drawing, it has to be three-dimensional. That's what made goddamn movies so great, because movies get 4D and 5D. See, 2D is like playing old Mario or Sonic. where they just running across the screen. And then they came with that third line, that third angle, where you can actually look around Mario now. Okay? And so that's life. Now what happens is we got stuck there. We got stuck at the fact that we can fall in love with the entirety of this figure, instead of realizing that the fourth dimensional perspective is that we're the one creating the figure. So imagine, right? Because I'm trying to show y'all the spell and the hex before I go on. Imagine the artist accidentally forgetting that he created the picture, and he starts to believe he's the picture. Imagine a person who created, let's say, SpongeBob. Imagine if the person who drew SpongeBob actually began to believe that he was SpongeBob, instead of the person that's creating SpongeBob and doing the voiceover, even though we know this ain't the same person. Let's just be hypothetical. If you draw a character named Johnny John, right? And you draw Johnny, and then you go in a studio and you do the voiceover for Johnny. Imagine if you accidentally forgot that you wasn't that you wasn't not Johnny, that you were not Johnny. Imagine if you started to believe you was actually Johnny. Now you're taking yourself from the creator to the perspective of the creation. And that's what we're doing. We forgetting that we're the creators. We're the people in this vessel using it to create our creation, because we're too busy believing that we are the creation. And so the language that we're using is not only causing us to vibrate low, and I'm going to tell you why I support that we're vibrating low in a minute, but it's not only causing us to vibrate low, it's causing us to use languages and terms that's subscribing us to a lower platform of our own existence. And so bringing it back, right? If you see a Buddhist monk, if you take a Buddhist monk and you take the average person from the Western Hemisphere, right, and you ask them both, and you deal with them both on the subject of hunger, right? The person in the Western Hemisphere, let's say America, the average person is going to say, "Damn, I'm hungry. I gotta eat," because your stomach growling. But then ask yourself, you just raised your hand and commanded the body to do that and confirmed that you did that, which means you're not the body. So technically, the proper terminology would not be "I'm hungry." The proper terminology would be "one must feed the body," because you're the one. What is one? That one module of consciousness connected all things. And what is the body? The body is the temporary physical form that you're assuming and controlling. But we make fun of that type of jargon over here. And so we would laugh at a Buddhist monk because they actually speak into existence a form of consciousness that keeps them fourth dimensionally vibrating. And then we, as the fools who've been educated by the foolish people, okay, who are occultic masons who have given us this demonic ass language and frequency to keep us on the alpha beta state of consciousness. Okay, that's why we use the alphabet. The alphabet is what? Used to comprise words and grammar. Grammar comes from the Latin word grimoire, which is a demonic spell book, and that demonic frequency that we vibrate on keeps our consciousness in a negative perspective for a certain sentence and term. And so that being said, we have been energetically imprisoned inside of these very vessels that we inhabit. Now let's go to a putting hexes on people, okay? Because we want to talk about energetic liberation. Not only have we vernacularly and psychologically become imprisoned, now that's internally. Now externally, we have manifested and been placed inside an environment to match such a description. Because when we're talking about, we're going to deal with squares specifically for this video, cubes to be exact. A square, right? 90 degrees is meant to contain energy. Anything that you sit inside a 90-degree module is going to become diluted. I'll give you an example, right? If you look at a river or an ocean, the water is constantly moving and flowing. It's not contained. We know that running water creates an electrical discharge. When that electricity is intelligent. So when that the water is not only flowing, it's intelligent and it's operating in its complete capacity to exist. Now take that same water out of the ocean and put it in your square swimming pool and don't do nothing with it. When you come back in about a week or two, that water is going to be corroded, diluted, dirty, okay, and no longer vibrational. It's going to become what you call dead water, okay? And so that being said, now why is this important? This is exactly what is happening with us spiritually. Now, let me give you another example before I go on. When you buy somebody a gift, right? I don't care if it's shoes, a wedding ring, a birthday cake, even when you pass away, even when you go to prison, what does it come in, or what do they put you in? A box. Why? Because a square 90 degrees is meant to contain energy. Now, when we're talking about putting a hex on somebody, okay, we have to go into sacred geometry. Now, when you look at these sacred geometrical shapes, being spheres, hexahedrons, dodecahedrons, etc., I can go all the way down the list. I'm not going to do that. Go look them up. You have what is called nets. Now, it's net, N-E-T. Now, a net Okay, for example, a hexahedron is a cube. Okay, that's the sacred geometrical word or vernacular expression for a cube. Now, if you want to see what a cube looks like opened up, you have to search hexahedron net. And I did a lecture on this about a year ago called Secret City of Code, where I broke this part down. When you open up a hexahedron, okay, it looks like a cross. So people think when you open up a cube, it's just equal on all sides. It's not. You have a square up here, a square in the middle, two squares on the side, you have two squares going down. And so a cube actually looks like a cross when you open it up. And a hexahedron, okay, is a box that stagnates your energy. So when somebody say they put you in a hex, that means they're putting you in a stagnated energetic environment. So for example, religion is a hex. So sometimes y'all hear General Seti say the book is the bottle and your spirit is the genie. When you trap the genie in a bottle, you're putting a hex on the genie because you're trapping it in a stagnated module of existence. And so religion, right? Jesus died on the cross. Christ comes from the word Christos, which means consciousness. And the cross is the cube opened up, aka the hexahedron, aka the box, aka the jack in the box. So if you fall for religion, your soul goes into the box. You are the genie. You go into the lamp. You are the Christ consciousness. You die on the fucking cross. And so when we're talking about putting a hex on somebody, right? In order to put a hex on somebody, you have to put them in an environment, okay? And we just talking about physically here. I'm gonna go to I'm gonna do mathematical angles in a second, but just dealing with physical reality for a second, and environment, and architecture, and all them type of things. In order to put a hex on somebody, you have to put them in an environment that is stagnant, to where there is no escape, okay? And then not only do you put them into the hex, in order to make them not realize they're into the hex, so they're inside the hex, so that there's no chance of them coming out of it, you have to cast spells on them and put a curse on them so that they forever conform and conceive the manifestation of the hex that you put them in. And the way that you do that is you give them a language, aka a lingo, to conform to. So everybody that is in a stagnant module of existence has their own lingo. If you notice, gang members have their own lingo, police have their own lingo, the courts got their own lingo. Everybody in the world who is contributing to destruction has their own language that they utilize. Now, why is this important? The reason that they have their own language is because what it does is the language manipulates their own consciousness into believing that their actions are okay. Let me give an example. If I walk up the street and I just shoot 5 people in the head, I'm going to be a murderer. And not only am I going to be a murderer, I'm going to be deemed a menace to society. And when the news broadcasts the crime, what is the news going to say? They're going to say this man viciously murdered 5 civilians. Why? Because consciously, that's deemed not okay on this soil. But if I go join the military and I do the same exact thing to somebody who's not from America, and there's no difference, I murder them the same exact way, do you know how the news is going to broadcast it? An American hero caused 5 casualties out at war. And so what's happening is the spells and the curse is taking place. The lingo is tricking your psychological state of conforming to the point of stagnation, aka the hex that you're in. That's it. If I walk up the street and I rob a man, the normal terminology for that is you robbed somebody and you committed a crime. But if I'm a gang member and I rob a man, consciously that's okay because the lingo says you just hit a lick. So hitting a lick is something that is subscribed to be a positive notion in gang culture and life, aka in the spells and curses, aka in the spelling, aka the lingo, in a psychological understanding, aka the curse of being in a gang. And so with that being said, family, we have to understand the science of hexes, spells, and curses and how they are currently influencing the mind. Now, when we're going into hexes, right, and we're dealing with them on an angular level or a mathematical level, certain shapes dictate energy. And that energy dictation is dependent upon the angle that you're dealing with, period. And so with that being said, we know that circles are one of the most powerful shapes okay, because they allow energy to flow. We know that a pyramid is the most powerful shape in nature, period, because it's three shapes in one. It's a sphere, a triangle, and a square. It's a circle, a triangle, and a square all in one. The foundation is a square, which causes it to hold the energy, and the triangle, okay, aka the 4 points of 45 degrees, cause it to aim this energy that's being ciphered, okay, at an upward perspective, and this causes the energy to refresh, and then all of these angles adding up to 360 causes the energy to cipher around. And we know that the word for pyramid refers back to the Greek word pyramidos, which literally means fire in the middle, and this is speaking about the energy in the middle. And so with that being said, family, this is why the pyramid is the most powerful shape, because the pyramid actually not only pulls energy from underneath it, but it pulls energy from above it and sustains it within the core of its own self. And so now when we take the science of understanding hexes, spells, and curses, and we deal with energetic liberation, this is why this is important. Earlier, I spoke upon the states of the brain. Now, when you're dealing with the states of the brain, also we have to be mindful of, and I did another video on this, I think it was called The Science of the Adam's Apple. I did it so long ago, I don't remember the title. But with that being said, the Adam's Apple is called the Adam's Apple, not for Adam, like in the Bible with the D, but Adam, like in science with the T, because your Adam's Apple literally reconstructs atoms to fit your psychological module of reality. This is called sonic geometry. Sonic dealing with sound, and geometry being the shape that atoms take via the sound that's produced. And so that being said, every day you shape your own reality and speak things into existence via your vernacular system, aka your Adam's apple. And your Adam's apple is used to express your consciousness, which has been corroded with nothing but false grammar, spells, cursive, and witchcraft, and black, and excuse me, I don't want to say black magic, white magic, which has been used to lower your vibration to a beta alpha state via the alphabet. So you are literally a walking piece of destruction every day that we need to first understand we're underneath this spell in order to break the curse. And so now when we bringing that back to its proper perspective, and we're talking about energetic liberation and liberating the mind is important to reaching full human potential, because we know that genetically within the strands of our DNA we have 64 amino acids, and we only actually use 20 of those amino acids which are activated. And so your amino acids, right, are activated through emotional vibration. And emotional vibration is not only an electromagnetic vibration within the DNA, is not only produced within the heart and the the nervous system, but it's also produced within the mind, within the aka the megahertz frequency of the brain. And so we know that your heart through neurocardiology talks to your brain. Your heart has brain cells, it has the capacity to remember. We know that your heart actually tells your brain what to do, and your brain tells your body how to react to the will of the heart. And so this is why in Egyptian culture they put the heart on the scale instead of the brain, because in order to change somebody's mind, you don't change the way they think, you change the way they feel. If you change somebody's heart, you're going to change their mind. This is why they say nothing is more powerful than love. And so since the world is being brainwashed and molded to become more cold-hearted, we're becoming more cold-minded and closed-minded at that. Now bringing that point back to its proper perspective, right? Boom. Let's say you have modules or little pockets of information inside your DNA, right? Now, the higher that you vibrate, the more condensed your DNA, your waveform is. The lower that you vibrate, the more wide in range your waveform is. And so this is called cymatics, which is the biological response of the DNA in reaction to light and electromagnetic frequency. And so let's go back to the amino acids. You have 64 amino acids in the DNA. You only use 20, which means you have 44 potential codes of information that you've never unlocked. And so we're talking about human potential. You don't know how great of a human you can become because you've never experienced your full DNA unlock. And so now why is this important? In order to access them strands of information within the DNA, aka them 44 amino acids, you have to be vibrating high. Now, not only is the language that you comprise to and the conception that subscribe to, in the perception of yourself, aka the third dimensional perspective of yourself that you subscribe to, keeping you in a low vibration, but your own emotions and your own perception of yourself is keeping you in a low vibration. So happiness, joy, and all the feelings of the higher self, okay, actually unlock DNA, because since the waveform is condensed, it's able to electromagnetically and cymatically strike more strands of genetic coding in the DNA and unlock these amino acids. But if the more negative about yourself that you think, okay, the less of your DNA you're able to unlock. And so we're talking about going in God mode as the mind elevates and ascends, the body will follow. The body is only evolving and developing according to the understanding of the mind. And so once again, if you look in the mirror and you say, I'm ugly, that's low weight. Not only is that a low level of consciousness, not only are you saying that in the alpha beta state, aka the lowest frequency of vernacular expression, not only is your atoms apple comprising your reality to compute your false illusional and delusional perception of yourself, but also with genetically, you locking yourself away from your full human potential because you're giving off low emotional waves within yourself cymatically. And so we are actually cursed, and there's been a spell casted upon humanity by occultic practitioners who just so misfortunately and mishappily happen to be geniuses in the world of science, to where they can take magic and they can take science and combine it into one and put this giant spell on humanity. So much to the point where you can get somebody to look into the mirror and not like themselves because of the color of their skin or their physical features, but then you can get somebody to look at a goddamn dollar that doesn't have any value on it and they can feel better about themselves over something that actually has no value versus something that has universal value. Let me give you an example. Our skin has billions of year old stardust in it, has billions of year old, material from the galaxy comprised in it. And you can look in the mirror as a black person and say, I don't like myself because I'm ugly, because I'm black. But then you can look at a dollar, which is not only made out of cotton, but has no value. And when you say that the dollar has no value, Nessa has no value. It's called fiat currency. But if you don't understand the science of fiat currency and, them taking the silver and the gold and the resources from behind the dollar, I'll give you another understanding to make sure you understand it has no value. It costs the same amount of money to print a $100 bill that it does to print a $1 bill. So if it costs the same to print a $1 bill and a $100 bill, how can a $100 bill be more valuable than a $1 bill? That's just common sense. But yet you'll look at this $1 bill and you'll see all of this so-called money, and you'll feel good about yourself over something that has no value, and you can't even look at yourself in the mirror and understand that you are literally God's creation, God being the universe, the highest form of omnipresent consciousness, and you can't even value the level of intellect that was put into giving you your own innate free will perspective of consciousness to exist in this body temporarily, to have a human experience. You can't appreciate all of that because you have a deep spell and curse on your mind put there by a cultic practitioner. And so when y'all keep hearing me say Freemasons run the country and the cultic people run the country, this is why the fuck I keep saying that, because this is why it's important. In order to reach the God within you, you got to break them out of jail. Listen, this is what I want y'all to do, family. I'm going to end this video on this because my spirit is telling me to end my video on this point. Not to end it on a scientific point, but to end it on a philosophical point. That's what my spirit just told me to do, so I'm going to listen. When you look in the mirror and you say, I want to find my higher self, what I want you to do is realize that your higher self is locked the fuck up inside your own mind. And you got to go in there and break your higher self out. And the way that you do that is through information. Okay? Information. I broke this down a long time ago. Is what? Information. Your inner form. Information dictates your inner form. Wrong knowledge manifests knowing the wrong things. See, you can know how to do shit, but that don't mean what you know is good. For example, some people know how to make crack. That don't mean you a motherfucking biochemist scientist because you know how to scientifically concoct some evil shit. That just means you know how to do evil. So the knowledge of good and bad doesn't determine necessarily a good and bad perspective on knowing. It's all about intent. It's not about what you know. It's about why you know it, how you know it, and what you intend to do to it. Will you take advantage? Okay? Or will you take ascension? And so when you want to wonder why, when you sit back and wonder why humanity is the way it is today, because everybody's looking for a God in the sky, but they don't understand that God is locked up doing 23 and 1 hour lockdown inside their own hearts. And since God is locked up in your own heart, he's locked up in your own mind. Or she's locked up in your own heart. She's locked up in your own mind. And so with that being said, family, I'm going to end this video on this. Hexes, spells, and curses are the reason the world is the way it is today. And in order to break the spell, you have to break your own perspective of thinking. And your perspective of thinking is broken once you accept that it was not your own creation. And when you realize it was not your own creation, you have to ask yourself, who gave it to me? And when you do the research on who gave it to you, then you come to realize that it was 9 times out of 10 a goddamn Freemason. Period. I don't give a fuck what you're in. Gang, police, teacher, whatever. The everyday lingo that you use and philosophy that you teach is rooted in a cultic practitioner somewhere. And you might say, Pharoah, why you use gangs and things like that? Okay? Gangs have occultic insignia, and I'm not a gang member, but I'm using them. I got a 5-point star here and a 6-point star here. Now, this is not gang insignia. This is for energy. The 5-point star is for the 5 points of motherhood, being birth, menstruation, giving birth to a child, motherhood, menopause, and death. And the 6-point star is for masculine energy, being arm, leg, head, and phallus. But to a gang member in their lingo, these have different points of view. But the point I want to make is some gang members have Jesus Christ in their oath. If you actually study gang oaths, and this is a fact, go ask any gang member that. And so one will ask themselves, what would a gang member be subscribing to Jesus Christ? What the fuck do Bloods and Jesus Christ and Christianity have to do with each other? Because we would have to ask ourselves, who made that that joint synchronization and conjunction in the mind? Who put that spell and that curse there? Because remember, Jesus dying on the cross is symbolic to your consciousness being trapped in the hexahedron. So anybody subscribing to that is trapping himself in a hexahedron. And so we have to ask ourselves, who made this conjunction? But the reason I'm making that is because there has been a hex placed and inserted in almost every train of thought, in every school of thought that you come upon. And once again, in order to break the hex, you have to break the perception and the mentality that you hold. And the way that you break it is first respecting and subscribing to the fact that it's not natural and you didn't give it to yourself and the universe didn't give it to you. Another misled human gave you this idealistic of thought and module of thinking that you choose to subscribe to. And what you've done is you've allowed a false entity and a false perspective of yourself via a third dimensional perspective at that to exist and to come into existence and to defend its own existence every time its false form of existence is threatened to be taken away. Because this module of your mind doesn't want to cease to exist. So anybody who threatens its very state of existence, it wants to lash out to an attack. And so a spell and a curse is vibrationally attacking you on every level. Metaphysically, sacred geometrically, genetically, okay, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, and psychologically. And the way that you destroy your psyche is you allow your heart to come through. You have to find it in your heart to vibrate higher than where you are. And then once you find it in your heart, that's where you generate your will from. And once you generate your will, only then can you break the curse. And the curse is broken psychologically, okay? There's a reason why the word psychic, psyche, and psychologically all start with the same beginning prefix, because they all go hand in hand. And so with that being said, family, hexes, spells, and curses have been placed upon the planet Earth. Now that you have watched this video and understood exactly what has been placed upon you, it is your job to displace the magic that has been negatively intended to stagnate the evolution of your own consciousness as a human. And with that being said, family, I love y'all. Peace.
We pop them bottles like Sarah, for that rhythm, my cup is a ritual.